Of course, now that the war is in its 24th hour, perhaps people were beginning to relax. They'd expected him to counterattack or attack against the Israelis early on. Very much a worst-case scenario for Israel and for the Middle East in general. The Israelis have said
Peter,
go ahead, Dean.
Peter, can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead.
I would point out that this would, if this is really what we think it is, that it will prompt virtually a certain Israeli retaliation, and the potential now for a wider conflict, I dare say, is there.
Dean, we can hear sort of bangs, explosions in the background. Can you give us any sense of what those are?
I can't, Peter. I really don't. I don't think it's fair to speculate. We can hear them too.
There was a missile attack, Dean. The radio confirms.
Radio confirms, Peter, that it was a missile attack.
Or there is a missile attack.
Or actually, the way they're putting it is there is a missile attack.
And there's sort of a crack every few seconds. Is that actually what sounds to you like a new explosion every few seconds?
I can't really say, Peter. It's difficult to hear, let alone to report.
It actually may also be your sharp breathing in your gas mask, which is fully understandable. Let's listen carefully again.
I think that's what we're hearing.
We are doing our best through every possible source at the moment to confirm exactly what has happened in Tel Aviv. But it is Israel's largest city. It is on the Mediterranean coast. It is the entry to Israel from all parts of the world, though the international airport is between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, Ben Gurion Airport. I cannot help but think at the moment, I don't know why, it's a totally abstract thought, that the contrast here, mentioning that airport, is when Anwar Sadat, the late Egyptian leader, went to Israel. Now we hear the sirens again, Dean.
Clear?
Are those in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv again, Dean?
It's Tel Aviv again. We're picking up the audio from Tel Aviv.
He can hear it. No, he can't. No, that's not an all clear. The all clear is steady.
Well, there's an advisory.
It is not an all clear.
Dean, the radio's giving instructions exactly how to put on the mask, how to seal the room, etc.
Peter, the radio is continuing to instruct people in civil defense methods how to don your gas mask, what to do in the case of an attack.
Cannot tell you how in the middle of the night this comes as an enormous shock to people after a day in which the Pentagon and the White House, the political establishment here, has spoken of the success of the opening phases of the campaign. We've all been cautioned against euphoria, and yet it has been an...
About the ramifications from a military and political point of view, Martin, you've spent a lot of your life out in that part of the world. Even though it has been well advertised to the Arabs as well as to the West that Israel may be dragged into this in hopes that the alliance could be broken up, and even though the Israelis would have every justification to respond to especially something as unthinkable, as mendacious as an attack of this kind, a chemical warfare attack, well, what about the Arab masses when they hear that Israel is involved? Will they listen to reason at all, in your judgment?
Well, you know, obviously it's a plan. It's the trap that the West has feared. It's the trap that Saddam Hussein has tried to set for the West. An attack on Israel, which Israel would then retaliate against, dragging the Arab countries, breaking up the coalition. It's a trap. Everyone knows that. It depends which Arabs we're talking about, Tom.
Well, let's talk about Hosni Mubarak, for example. He was not very forthcoming the other day on whether or not he would stay out of this if Israel got involved, whether or not he would stay in the alliance.
That's right, Tom. Well, the verdict here, he made several ambiguous statements. The verdict here is that among the government here is that Mubarak would stay out, Egypt would stay out. Egypt did recognize the right of Israel to retaliate if attacked. Even Syria has said that if Israel is attacked by another Arab country, then Syria would not necessarily intervene if Israel retaliated against that Arab country. One has to remember one thing, that those Arab states that are lined up with the United States against Iraq are countries that have their own interests at stake. And Syria, for instance, which is always seen as the weak link in the alliance, the American alliance against Iraq, Syria is a long-term enemy of Iraq with very definite interests, which culminate in deposing Saddam Hussein. So my bet would be that because of the nature of this attack, especially if there are many chemical warheads, I'd say that personally that the Arab coalition against Iraq would stand. Of course, I'm speculating.
Or at the very worst, maybe just be neutralized momentarily.
I would say so, and don't forget one thing: in terms of sheer instant power, if Israel, with its air force, with its military power, were to take the place of those Arab states lined up with the United States, the combined American-Israeli fighting power, on an instant basis, in America would be vastly strengthened by having Israel on its side. However, of course, that would terribly complicate the post-war period.
There is no end to which Saddam Hussein will not reach in an effort to achieve what he wants to now, a chemical warfare attack. It appears tonight in Tel Aviv on Israel. Martin, we'll give you a few moments to collect yourself and to get some additional information for us, if you can there.
So far in Jerusalem, I have heard 3 air raid sirens, and as I was getting out of bed to the sirens, I thought I detected a small explosion from far away. I did not feel the ground shake or anything like that, but I could hear it with my ears. I immediately put my clothes on, went down and got in my car to drive to the Bureau to meet up with my fellow CNN workers here. I have with me now Trey Haney. Andre Brown is taking these pictures. Izzy Lindbergh is helping us gather information. The pictures you're looking at, I'm going to look at the monitor here. As I said, our Jaffa Road, you do see there goes a car going by. The people hear the sirens. They have been advised by the Civil Defense, or Haga here, to put your gas mask on, go into a sealed room until further notice. At this moment, we have our mask on, but we're not going to the sealed room. It's 1 floor below us. We can get there in probably 20 seconds or 30 seconds if need be. We have chemical suits. We have atropine. We can take care of ourselves. Here comes one of our colleagues into our building. The building we are in houses journalists. It's Jerusalem Capitol Studios, ABC, CBS, CNN. The Canadians are here, and the French, and the Europeans. Many European networks are here. It's not as busy as it is on a normal day. I guess many people took the advice of Haga, or the Civil Defense, and stayed home and stayed in a sealed room. But right now in Jerusalem, I have heard no explosions in Jerusalem. I did hear something go over our head, which we thought may have been a jet. I don't know. I could not see through these windows. I'm going to pull this. This is not a seal I'm taking off. This is just a filter for a live shot, which you can't see, so I can see better out these windows. Okay. Looking down, I see the lit live shot location downstairs. And again, the road, Jaffa Road, is very empty. If you look straight out across, if Andre can hear me, Andre, can you hear me? You can see the Knesset looking straight out across, a shot of the Knesset.
Larry?
It's where the Israeli parliament meets. Yes, Lou?
If I may interrupt your reporting for just a moment, we're going to turn now to Tel Aviv, also under a civil defense alert for missile attack. And there we're going to try to talk with the security chief at the Hilton Hotel in Tel Aviv. Are you there? Yes. Are you there? This is...
What's happening? You don't put a mask?
Yep. This is Lou Dimes in New York. Can you hear me? Is this the Hilton Hotel? Excuse me, the Sheraton Hotel? Okay. As you might expect, we're going to be bouncing around on these communications. That we have them at all, to my mind, is a tremendous credit to our engineering and production staff around the world. We're going back to Larry Register in Jerusalem. Larry, are you still able to hear me?
Yes, Lou, I can still hear you fine.
There have been no further, what you would say were explosions in the past 20 minutes?
No, Lou, not since I last talked to you. Nothing has changed. There's a phone call. Maybe I can get that. I might have some more information.
Okay, the pictures you're watching are of our being shot out of the windows of our Jerusalem bureau. It's CNN bureau, and we're going to stay with those, with that video and audio contact. But first, we're going to return now to Wolf Blitzer at the Pentagon, who has a further update for us. Wolf?
Yes, Lou, we're getting word here at the Pentagon that at least 2 of those Iraqi Scud missiles, believed to be Iraqi Scud missiles, have landed south of Tel Aviv in populated suburban areas. One along the Mediterranean coast in a town south of Tel Aviv called Hulon, and we're told it's in an area where there's a well-known hospital in that suburban area called the Wolfson Hospital south of Tel Aviv. No knowledge of any damage, no word yet whether it had a chemical warhead or a conventional warhead. The second missile is reported to have landed southeast of Tel Aviv in a area called Kiryat Shalem. And again, these are populated areas, suburban areas where commuters who live in the suburbs and work in Tel Aviv go, and certainly the indications from these 2 loud explosions that were heard throughout Tel Aviv but not in Jerusalem would indicate that these 2 missiles, Scud missiles, believed to have been Iraqi Scud missiles, landed in these areas near Tel Aviv. Indeed, Saddam Hussein has been promising for weeks that if there was a war, his first targets would be Israel, and these reports indicate that he has lived up to that threat. The question now is, what are the Israelis going to do? Yes, Lou?
Wolf, we're going to try to find that out. I just want to explain for our viewers who are watching pictures from our Jerusalem bureau, listening to Wolf Blitzer at the Pentagon talk about what is happening in Tel Aviv. We have heard reports of as many as 5 missiles fired. We have confirmed now, as I understand it, Wolf, 2 of those missiles have landed south of Tel Aviv. Our correspondent in Tel Aviv, Richard Roth, is on the telephone. Richard, can you tell us, do you have any knowledge of injuries in those missile attacks?
I'm not going to be able to provide much information except what people are going through here. Right now I'm in the Hilton Hotel in a sealed room on the 6th floor with dozens of other hotel guests and journalists. We have heard several, at least I would say 10, 11 explosions. It's unclear what kind or where they might be coming from that are reverberating throughout the city. Sometime around 2:15 in the morning local time, the air raid siren went off, and this city, which had been bracing for weeks for potential trouble, raced into sealed rooms, donned gas masks. I'm sitting next to dozens of people who are wearing their black gas masks. People have been told to stay put, no smoking, and we are just listening to explosions. The rooms are sealed up. We are not able to look outside. We just keep hearing very loud explosions and booms going off. The city yesterday was deserted as everyone was inside their homes, and it appeared that some people thought that maybe the worst was over and that Saddam Hussein would not be able to fulfill his threat. Apparently that might have been wishful thinking. Lou?
Richard, thank you. We have just been informed that guests at the International Hotel in Duran have been informed to take several Saudi Arabia to move to the bomb shelter, and we're not exactly certain of what those initial warnings mean, but we're going to turn again to Wolf Blitzer, and Wolf, hopefully you can add to this story that is breaking very quickly.
Clearly, Lou, missiles have landed in Israel. Scud missiles, the presumption here at the Pentagon is that these missiles were from the mobile surface-to-surface missiles, the Scud missiles that the Iraqis had claimed would go after targets in Israel as well as in eastern Saudi Arabia. And if this alert that has now been reported in Dhahran in eastern Saudi Arabia is true, there could be a missile alert at least going after some of the targets in the eastern part of Saudi Arabia. Throughout the day, officials here at the Pentagon had been telling journalists that yes, the fixed sites were believed to have been knocked out. The fixed Scud ballistic missile sites, especially those in the western part of Iraq, dubbed by the U.S. intelligence community as H2 and H3, those were believed to have been destroyed in the initial U.S. airstrikes. But there was concern, indeed mounting concern throughout the day here at the Pentagon, that the Iraqis in the past 24 or 48 hours had managed to conceal some of the mobile missiles, and these are the ones that presumably have landed in Israel. We have confirmed here at CNN that 2 of those missiles have landed south of Tel Aviv in suburban areas, one in a suburban town along the Mediterranean called Hulon, another one southeast of Tel Aviv called Kiryat Shalem. No word on the extent of injuries, no word whether this was a chemical warhead or a conventional warhead. Details are still sketchy, but what is clearly obvious here at the Pentagon at this hour is that U.S. officials are bracing for some sort of Israeli response. Lou?
Well, thank you. We're going to turn quickly to Larry Register in Jerusalem. Larry?
Okay, Lou, what I have right now is Nachman Shai, Brigadier General Nachman Shai, who's the chief spokesman for the Israeli Defense Forces, said on Israel radio that 2 missiles have landed in Tel Aviv. I have another source on the phone with me now who says military sources are confirming that 5 missiles, I repeat, 5 missiles have fallen in the Tel Aviv area. They believe they were chemical warheads. He doesn't know how. I don't know how he knows that. This is what military sources are telling him. Do you have any other information you can pass on to me?
Larry, all I can pass on to you is what Wolf Blitzer at the Pentagon, who I assume you've just heard, he, like you, has just confirmed 2 missiles landing south of Tel Aviv. Richard Roth, our correspondent, who is now in a shelter in Tel Aviv, saying that there are far more than 2 explosions. In addition, we have been told
okay,
that...
Lou,
yes.
Excuse me, Lou.
Yes.
Palestinians in Kalkilia and Kfar Saba have reported between 2 to 5 missiles. These are Palestinian sources who are saying they heard 5 explosions. Is that correct, Yoni?
Larry Register is talking with his staff, looking for confirmation of that. Okay. Larry, again, we have that confirmation of the 2 missiles from the Pentagon.
Starting at 2:10, they heard the explosions very clearly. Okay. Any other information you have? That's it. Okay. Call me back when you can.
Larry Register talking to one of his sources in Jerusalem. Larry, thank you. We are, I'm going to recap, if I may quickly, confirm 2 Scud missiles have landed in Tel Aviv. There is no report of injuries. The extent of damage, no information as to whether it is a chemical or conventional warhead on either of the 2 confirmed missile strikes against Tel Aviv. We again have been told that the guests at the hotel in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, that the International Hotel are to report to their bomb shelters. We cannot at this point tell you precisely what that means. But to bring us
missiles, including at least a couple up in the Haifa area, a total all over Israel of 8 to 10. 3 to 5 of the missiles hit in the Tel Aviv area. Here's the crater caused by the conventional warhead on this particular Scud. The Scuds can be equipped with a lot of different warheads. General George Christ just pointing out to us here in the studio that from the look of this damage, part of Saddam Hussein's message may be that he has a somewhat larger conventional warhead on these Scud missiles than was otherwise widely believed. And if the Iraqis go after Saudi Arabia, in Saudi Arabia, the Saudis have Chinese ballistic missile with a megaton warhead to fire back. Now, all of that we were told by Leslie Stahl at the White House not long ago, as we continue to look at this damage in Tel Aviv caused by the Scuds, that some Scud missiles had been fired at Saudi Arabia. The U.S. Defense Department had confirmed that. Where they were fired and where they hit and what damage they did in Saudi Arabia remains unclear at this hour. Now, as we continue to look at these photographs, first pictures in from Israel of the damage there tonight, keep in mind that the casualty total is said to be very low. The first reports are not even many people were wounded by this. You may want to note that the sirens had sounded in Tel Aviv before the Scuds went off, and that may account for the what is now an amazingly low casualty figure when you look at how much damage was wrought by this one single Scud hit in this particular Tel Aviv's neighborhood. In other late Gulf War headlines tonight, a confirmed 7 Iraqi Scud missiles hit Israel, possibly as many as 10. Israel denies that retaliation is actually in progress at the moment. They may have scrambled in the direction of Iraq intending to retaliate, but as of the moment, the Israelis say they are not retaliating. President Bush is described as, quote, outraged. Allied warplanes continue to hit Iraqi positions inside Kuwait and inside Iraq. That includes B-52 strikes. A late announcement from the Pentagon confirming that Iraqi Scud missiles have been fired into both Israel and Saudi Arabia. Now, practically nothing is known about the Scud missiles fired into Saudi Arabia. General Chris was just noting for us that the Saudis have some Chinese missiles with which they could retaliate if they chose to do so. The White House says now that President Bush is, quote, outraged. President Bush is known to have met tonight, I shouldn't say no, reported to have met tonight with Secretary of State Baker and has been in touch with the Israeli representatives in Washington and also representatives of some of the Arab allies, including the Egyptians. No confirmation that the missile or missiles fired into Saudi Arabia even hit anything. We're continuing to check. All the Defense Department has said is that, yes, some Scuds were fired at Saudi Arabia tonight. This is in addition and separate and apart from the Scuds that hit Israel. We do know what happened to the missiles aimed at Israel. At least we know a few things. Israeli radio says 7 people were what it describes as slightly hurt in tonight's missile attacks, which dramatically alter the boundaries of this Gulf War. Saddam Hussein had threatened to hit Israel, said he would hit Israel immediately if the United States attacked him. He made good on that threat tonight. It is not absolutely confirmed if any of the warheads on the Scuds that hit Israel were chemical or biological or nerve gas. This particular strike in this particular Tel Aviv neighborhood clearly, and according to the Tel Aviv mayor, had a conventional weapons charge on it, but one larger than most military experts would have expected on a Scud. At the United Nations, Israel's ambassador is quoted as denying that there's been any retaliation or will be any. He says Israel was left vulnerable to such an attack.
About 8 to 10 Scud missiles were launched from Iraq against Israel. Some of them hit the areas of Tel Aviv and Haifa. It just shows what kind of risk Israel took upon itself when it refrained from preemptive strike.
In the air war over Iraq and Kuwait, the British report the loss of a second Tornado warplane in the offensive. That would raise to the confirmed total of 4 Allied warplanes lost so far. Those are officially acknowledged as lost. That includes 1 U.S. warplane, an F-18 Hornet. U.S. warplanes were busy all through the night and day launching more attacks from Saudi Arabia. One American aviator talked of his experiences over Baghdad and of his encounter with Iraqi warplanes.
We didn't, obviously we couldn't see if they were coming close. Well, discretion being the better part of valor, we decided that we would leave the target area before we took one up the tailpipe. We'll still be there tomorrow.
Iraq now claims that 60 Allied planes total have been destroyed. The Allies say that it's 4 planes total lost so far. There are suggestions from the Allied side that the Iraqis are trying to count in some Tomahawk missiles that they may have brought down. Those are guided missiles that do not contain any pilots. Let's go back now to Tom Fenton in Tel Aviv for an update on what's happening in the wake of the Iraqi Scud missile attacks on Israel. Tom?
Well, we've got some more reports, Dan, from one report from one of our own cameramen who visited 2 of the sites in Tel Aviv. The first one in Holon, he said that was an industrial area. It set off a fairly large fire, and that was clearly a conventional warhead. The second one, that was the ones you've seen in those video pictures with a large crater, that was in the Hatikva area. It landed on a house. There was a lot of blast damage in the area. That also was clearly a conventional warhead. People there was some panic. People there were complaining that the police were afraid to go into the area. I mean, I suppose it's natural if there's a suspicion that it was a chemical attack. And one of the first persons to arrive was Mayor Shlomo Lahat, commonly called Tish, a very popular man, a man who has been reelected time and time again as mayor of Tel Aviv. Now, the one area up in the north where there was some question about nerve gas, that north, I mean 5 miles north of here on the highway at the Tel Baruch intersection, apparently that area has been hosed down and decontaminated. Once again, I have no firm report about whether or not that was a non-conventional chemical warhead. So far, we have no firm reports of chemical warheads, and only reports of people either lightly injured or mildly injured. No reports yet of deaths, but as usual in cases like this, it's a long time before all the information filters in. It's in the middle of the night. There's some confusion, of course, and we probably won't know for several hours the full extent of what has happened.
Thanks, Tom Fenton. Let's check in with Bill Plant of the State Department for an update on Secretary Baker's conversations with some of the Arab allies, and I believe, is it true, Bill, also with the Israeli ambassador?
That's right, Dan. We know that the Secretary was at the White House, as Leslie Stahl described earlier, and he did talk to the Israeli ambassador, the Syrian ambassador, and the Saudi ambassador once they had learned of these Scud attacks on Israel. Now, it's safe to say, I think, that the Secretary probably repeated the American position that we wish that the Israelis would not retaliate against Iraq for firing the Scud missiles. However, I don't know that. It is, however, what the United States asked Israel to do last week. And last week, Israel said no. Now, the U.S. would have offered to defend Israel again, and we'll see where that goes. It's too early to say. In the meantime, of course, it was necessary to talk to the Syrians and the Saudis, because the understanding that the Secretary of State had with them when he left the Middle East last week was that if Israel had to respond to an attack by Iraq, that should not break up the coalition. And that's where that is left, and I'm sure that the Secretary tonight was busy trying to make sure that he still had that understanding.
Bill, any information there on this surprise announcement that in addition to the Scuds that hit Israel, that some Scuds were at least fired at Saudi Arabia?
No, there was word here of the Scuds that went toward Israel. None